Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast, our interactive 15-minute review of this week's message. We revisit the word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode. My name is Paul Adefarasin.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've pulled together some really compelling source material today.
Yes, we have.
All grounded in, well, a pretty powerful theological framework. We're looking at something fundamental, divine identity.
That's right. And the topic is really unpacking this concept of Imago Dei, the image of God, and seeing how it applies practically, how to actually walk in God's authority.
Okay.
So the sources, they give us this framework for understanding a real shift. It's about moving away from constantly striving to become something.
Right, that feeling of never quite being enough.
Exactly, and instead learning to live from the power you already have, from an identity that's already authenticated.
Already stamped with approval, so to speak.
Heaven's authentication, yeah. And understanding this, it changes everything.
So let's start there. Unpacking Imago Dei. The material uses some vivid language, visible image of the invisible God. A living, breathing, walking, animated image.
And God's mirror. That one's important.
What does that functionally mean, being God's mirror?
Well, think about a mirror. It reflects what's put in front of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is relational. We were made to be God's representatives here on earth, his reflection. When you look at God and say, you're awesome, the identity he placed in you is designed to reflect that back, to embody that.
Okay, so if the identity is inherent, already given, why is it so hard for people to stop this striving? The sources really hammer this point about living from it, not for it.
Well, I think it's because, the world teaches us the opposite. It's all about acquisition. You get value from what you achieve, your title, your stuff.
Performance-based worth.
Precisely. But the revelation here is that you have heaven's authentication and heaven's validation before you do anything. That's the game changer.
So knowing that is what stops the endless cycle of trying to prove yourself.
Yeah. The identity you're searching for is actually the ground you're standing on.
And recognizing that, the material says, releases power. It leads to confidence, assurance. It also mentions facilitating alignments, divine structures, and opportunities. That sounds a bit like jargon, maybe?
It can sound that way, but let's break it down. Divine structures contextually seem to be like the systems or pathways God puts in place, to get resources or answers to you.
Okay, like channels opening up.
Kind of. And alignments, that's about positioning, moving you out of situations where maybe your God-given identity isn't valued and into places where it is, where you fit God's purpose for you.
Right. So understanding you are the Imago Dei, it kind of short-circuits that whole comparison game, doesn't it? Yeah.
Because
the validation isn't external anymore.
Exactly. That's it. The transformation starts inside, and then you see the external results. And that confidence you mentioned, that's the key, really, that unlocks your ability to exercise authority.
Okay, let's pivot then. Because if we're meant to walk in this authority, what stops us? The sources point to, well, our own history, failure, devaluing ourselves.
That's a huge barrier. We tend to cling to our mistakes, don't we, our failures. And that makes it really hard to embrace being made in God-likeness.
Which brings us to this fascinating concept the sources talk about, selective divine amnesia.
Yes, this is powerful stuff.
The reference is Isaiah 43:25. God says, he blotteth out transgressions. But the kicker is why. He says, he does it for mine own sake.
Right, and well, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
What does that mean, for his own sake?
If you connect the dots in the material, it seems God's primary motivation here is utility. He needs the vessel that's you to be usable for its intended purpose. If he kept a running tally of all your screw-ups, you'd be constantly condemned, right? Paralyzed, unable to operate in the authority he gave you. So he chooses to forget, not necessarily because you earned it, but because he needs you functional, operational, whole.
So it's almost like his purpose for us overrides his memory of our failures. Is that putting it too strongly? Does that downplay repentance?
That's a fair question. I don't think the sources suggest it downplays repentance. Repentance is still crucial. It's what opens the door. But God's amnesia afterwards is what keeps the door open, ensuring that lingering shame doesn't block you from fulfilling your destiny. It's about the completeness of the transaction.
Okay. And we see this play out in the examples given. Paul, for instance, formerly Saul. The sources don't mince words. They call him a murderer. an assassin.
Yeah, pretty extreme background.
But God's amnesia kicks in. He forgets that past.
Yeah.
Allows Paul to become this major writer of the New Testament.
And Peter, too. Denied Jesus 3 times. Cussing, apparently.
A total meltdown moment.
Huge failure. But God forgets it, strategically forgets, and positions Peter almost immediately as a leader, the rock.
So the lesson there, the sources say, is that we have to learn to forget what God forgets, to get out of shame jail.
Exactly. That shame jail or guilty prison, that self-imposed condemnation. If God's forgotten it, you need to discipline yourself to forget it too.
Okay, so that's God forgetting. But then there's the flip side, God remembering. Sovereign recall, the sources call it. How does that work?
It's the contrast, isn't it? Amnesia deals with judgment and failure. Recall deals with blessing and covenant. When God remembers, it's strategic. It's about fulfilling his promises.
Like Sarah, waiting 65 years, barren, then God remembered her.
And Isaac was born. Or Hannah, God remembered her prayers, her distress. And Samuel, whose name literally means what I asked of God, was the result.
So the delay wasn't denial, it was waiting for the appointed time.
That seems to be the idea, waiting for the moment of fulfillment that God had already planned.
The sources had some really striking personal stories about this. That Elijah Day testimony.
Right.
Wow, a 4-year degree turning into over a decade of setbacks, 2016 to 2022.
Imagine the frustration, the feeling of being stuck in that cycle.
Right. But then the breakthrough. He goes to the IT department, and they find out his graduation had actually happened the previous year.
Quietly, without him even knowing, it had already been processed.
That feeling of, like, I missed it, but then realizing it was already done. The sources call this stockpiling.
Yes, blessings granted, but sort of held in reserve, stockpiling in heaven, waiting for the right moment to be revealed or discovered. Years of confusion resolved instantly.
Like retroactive blessing. And there was another one. The person who passed promotion exams, despite system failures, being the exception. God making a way when everything else said no.
Yeah, bypassing the rules, the backlog, because of that divine intention. It shows God making exceptions.
Okay, so we've got identity, we've got overcoming the past through God's forgetting and remembering. Now let's talk about putting it into action. Authority.
Right, because the identity isn't just for navel-gazing, it comes with authority for action.
The material points to Luke 10:99. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the ability of the enemy.
And notice the wording there. It's crucial. The enemy has ability.
But not authority. What's a practical difference there in, like, everyday life?
Okay, think of it like this. Ability is raw power, capacity. Like, someone might have the physical ability to break into your house.
Okay.
But authority is the legal right, the jurisdiction. They don't have the authority to be there. The enemy can cause trouble. So confusion, that's ability. But he has no legal right to derail your destiny or revoke your God-given identity because the authority to govern earth was given to humanity.
He's a trespasser, not the owner.
Exactly. He lost his authority. Humanity has it.
Which connects right back to Genesis 1.26, the original mandate. We were made to govern earth, be productive, multiply, replenish, subdue, have dominion. That's quite a job description.
It is, and it applies on every scale, from personal life to business, even to nations. The sources link national strength to collective productivity, think G22 nations. It's why even on a community level, the principle is no broke man in this house. Prosperity enables influence and dominion.
But the sources also caution about scaling that productivity or authority. It's not just about being busy. It mentioned needing trustworthy and tenably able people. Why that specific emphasis?
Because scaling improperly is dangerous. If you give massive responsibility or authority to people who lack the character or the competence or even just the discretion, well, things can fall apart fast.
You could crash the whole system.
Right. Or compromise the mission, lose vital knowledge, trade secrets. Character has to match the scale of responsibility. Otherwise, it implodes.
Okay, so how do we access the specific authority mentioned in Matthew 16.19, the power to bind and loose? This seems to go beyond just general dominion.
It does, and according to the sources, this requires tapping into the spirit of wisdom and revelation from Ephesians 1.
So, insight, seeing things differently.
Yes, seeing things from God's perspective. You need to know the prototype Christ and perceive what God has already bound or loosed in the heavenly realm. You don't just declare things randomly. You align your words with heaven's existing decrees. You see as God sees.
Calling things that are not as though they are, based on what is in heaven?
Precisely. It's cooperative authority.
All right, finally, we need to touch on something the sources flagged as Particularly complex right now, especially in Nigeria, this awkward intersection of faith, religion, politics, government.
Yes, this part requires careful, impartial handling, as the sources themselves suggest. It's sensitive territory.
They point out, for example, that the terror in the north affects everyone, Christians, Muslims. It's not just one group's problem.
Right, and the reality is the country has both major faiths, and neither is going away. So leaders have to move beyond that framework of interfaith crisis and towards, well, national unity and security for everyone.
Which demands real influence and diplomacy. The sources call for serious dialogue to fight disinformation. Why is that so critical?
Because bad information leads to bad actions. Misinformation, disinformation, they fuel conflict, division. It can threaten peace itself. The sources even reference the Nigerian Civil War as a stark warning.
So tackling this requires immense skill, diplomacy. Maybe saying, as the material put it, very hard things to bigger people in very soft ways.
Exactly. It takes real leadership grounded in a vision for the whole nation's development and stability. It highlights how this God-given authority isn't just personal, it extends to governance, to preserving peace.
It really brings it full circle, doesn't it? Understanding your identity unlocks the confidence. Then God's strategic forgetting helps you overcome the past's condemnation.
Right. Clears the slate.
And that solid foundation lets you actually act effectively, use the power, be productive, influence things for the better.
It all flows from knowing who you are, the Imago Dei, God's representative, his mirror.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to maybe chew on this week, especially if you feel like you're stuck in a delay. Think about Joseph.
Ah, yeah. Good example.
Years in a pit, chains, prison. That suffering wasn't just pointless waiting. The sources suggest it was character prep, his pit stop.
Building the stature needed for the palace.
Exactly. The delay wasn't denial. It was the very mechanism for his growth. He developed leadership, management skills, resilience, all down there.
So he don't get like a gradual pay rise or a slow climb up the ladder?
No. Because the character was ready,
Yeah.
the moment the butler remembered him, boom,
Yeah.
straight to the palace. Instant elevation. So maybe your current struggle, that pit stop you feel you're in, it's actually credit building up for your future.
Yeah.
Immediate elevation.
That growth in stature is happening now, even if you can't see it. Ready for your day of showing.
Something to hold on to.
Definitely a powerful thought. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. Follow the podcast, and please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.